G'day and welcome to another Towards Understanding podcast. I've been doing interviews like at this podcast for, 15, 16, maybe 18 years now. I've talked to a lot of people. And I got to be honest that it's very rare that somebody has a story that takes my breath away, because I've heard a lot of them. But this one did. What you're about to hear from Kari Hoffmann is truly remarkable. Remarkable in its harrowing aspects, as we're going to hear about a random stranger throwing her 5-year-old son from the top of a shopping mall in America, 39 feet high, to land on a concrete floor. But also shockingly incredible in her trust, her faith, and in a God who did miracles in the midst of absolute despair. This story did take my breath away. I'm sure it will for you as well. Before we get there, could I just take a moment to ask you to like, rate this, review, pass it on to friends, share it with others. We always want Towards Understanding to stay free, to be able to share it with as many people as we can. We just want to get these stories out to people, and doing all those things helps us do that. So please, thank you so much. Let's get stuck into this conversation with Kari Hoffmann. Kari joins me on the line now. Kari, thanks so much for your time.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Kari, as you read this book, for those who have not had the chance to do that yet, I was trying to think of how would I describe it, and it feels like it's sort of part documentary. It's part the thoughts that are in your head. It's most assuredly, without doubt, from sort of page 1 to the final page, a story that you want to clearly say God had a remarkable hand in your life in so many different ways, and in Landen's life, despite some terrible aspects of what occurred. And we're going to get into that story. My guess is, and often I ask this question to people at the end of our interviews, but I'd like to start this at the start of ours. The aim for when someone picks up this book and walks, they read the story and they walk away, what were you hoping that they would walk away with?
I mean, I want people to know just how much Jesus loves them, and that he still does miracles. And when you call out his name, he is there, and he does answer you no matter what.
I love that. Let's tell a bit of this story. Many people may have already heard parts of it, but could you, I'm also wary that whenever we have a conversation, even after someone who's written a book, that every time you tell a story of something of great hurt in a family, it does cost something. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you for being willing to do that. Could you tell us the story of what did occur at that mall, and then we want to talk about all the remarkable things that God did.
Yeah, it was, Landen was in preschool. He was 5 years old, and he was going to be moving on to kindergarten. And so we have teacher conferences where you go and have a conference and just go. They tell you how well or not well your child is doing if they're able to move on to the next grade. And so I had just finished that conference with Landen in his preschool, and we wanted to go celebrate, to do something fun with another mom and a friend that I was with at that preschool, because both of the boys had done so well that they were ready for kindergarten, and it just seemed like a good way to celebrate the ending of preschool. So we live in a city that is really close to the Mall of America in Minnesota, and we thought that it was April here in Minnesota, but it was really cold and it was snowing, even though it was supposed to be spring. And so we couldn't do anything outside. So we thought we would go to the Mall of America and they have a Crayola experience there where you can, to do different things with crayons. And so we thought that would be the perfect way to end preschool. So we headed out there. And the mall didn't open until 10 o'clock, and it was about 9:30 when we arrived. And so we were kind of waiting in our car to go into the mall. And while I was there and on my drive there, like pulling into that parking lot, I really did get a overwhelming feeling that something might be wrong today, that I should just pray for guardian angels to protect us, to plead the blood of Jesus around us. And I just wanted Jesus and angels to be covering us as we walked through the mall that day. And I don't know why that happened during that time, but because I could not tell you another time in my life that I really had felt that. But I just felt I needed to pray for protection. And it wasn't enough for me to not go in the mall, because it wasn't like a warning to stop. It was just like, I felt like I was aware. Just be aware of what's around you. And so I prayed before we went into the mall. And I also prayed under my breath, like walking in there. I wasn't doing it so that people could tell what I was doing, but it was just kind of in my head. I was just like aware to just pray for protection. And so I did that. And we got over to the Crayola Experience, which is on the third floor at the Mall of America, and it's right next to the Rainforest Cafe. And at the Rainforest Cafe, they have a alligator inside of a moat. And so you step on rocks and look at this alligator, which usually is going up and down and has steam around it. But because the mall wasn't open, it wasn't on. And so the boys were kind of just standing there waiting for the mall or the Crayola Experience to open. And they were looking at that alligator, and a man had come up who was leaning over the rocks with them, looking at the alligator and whispering in their ears. And I really didn't think anything of it because he had short sleeves on, and it looked like to me that he was a maintenance guy and that he worked there. And so I thought he was going to get the alligator going for the boys. And so I did ask him, do you not want us to be stepping here on this rock? Because I thought that he needed to be working on getting it going. And he reassured me that no, we were fine. It was okay that we were there, and smiled at me. And so it really made me trust him. I stepped back, but then he leaned even closer, and he was whispering in their ears even more. And the boys were giggling. And I was just standing back chatting with that mom. But I thought it was odd, but I did not feel like danger, believe it or not. So I stepped back again. And as soon as I did, he grabbed Landen under the armpits and ran to the balcony and threw him over the edge, which was not far. It was about 10 feet, I would say. So picked him up off the rock and ran over the balcony and threw him in the blink of an eye, a couple seconds. And when he did that, because I had prayed for protection going in there, I recognized it as a spiritual attack, and I just yelled, "Somebody threw my baby, everybody pray." And I just wanted everybody to pray for God to save him, and I wanted Jesus to save him, and I wanted angels to catch him. And that's what I was yelling and asking people to pray, everybody around me. And I ran down those escalator stairs and got to him as fast as I could. And as soon as I got down there was a woman standing there, and I couldn't find him. And she pointed at him, and I ran and scooped him up. And she said, "No, you have to put him down. You can't pick somebody up who's that injured." And so I set him down. And as soon as I did, there were two other ladies right behind me who happened to work at Children's Minnesota Hospital, and they started giving him CPR immediately. And I don't remember what he looked like. God protected me from that. I still don't. I don't remember any blood or broken bones, but he was very injured. And I guess that he was not breathing. He did not have a heartbeat, and there was blood and broken bones, but I do not remember seeing any of that. I just was cheering Landon on to take a breath and to have a heartbeat and to live, and asking everybody around to pray. And they were. People were praying.
You literally were shouting this out, right? Like, everybody pray, stop looking, just pray, which is a remarkable sense of faith. And as you talked about, this random guy's walked 10 feet, but thrown him off a 39-foot balcony. It's crazy that he would even have the chance of surviving, but these remarkable people were there, and eventually a breath did come back in to him as they worked on it. And this was, you call your book The Miracle at the Mall. It could have been called The Horror at the Mall. It could have been called all these things, but you are very focused on the fact that God was doing work, which is why I know you would have called it this. But talk to us then about, even you sort of really credit, actually the first miracle of all of this was the fact that those two first people were there. They were supposed to be in another shop, but the shop was, it wasn't open for some reason. Just that day, 10 minutes, they were going to be open. And so they were standing around, and they were nurses that could actually help. It was remarkable, wasn't it?
That's absolutely true. And I didn't know that, until we got to the hospital, which the hospital that we were going to is where they worked, and they worked on the cardiac unit, and they save lives every day. They give CPR every day. So they knew what to do right when they got there. And I found out, after I arrived there, that they worked on that floor, and that they happened to be at the mall on the second level, standing at the balcony, waiting for a store to open that they at that morning. And they both think that God placed them there for that exact moment in time, that they needed me, that I needed them.
This is just the start of a whole lot of incredible things that God starts doing in Landen's life, in your life. But we often talk about these miracle moments, these things that occur, but they the way miracles happen is because of the tragedy and the difficulty. It's not like suddenly this moment happened, he got breath and he stood and walked. There was a long journey that you guys then had to go on. Could you, and we can't talk the whole story, that's why you wrote the book, but, as we tell a little bit more of this, so suddenly you find yourself, he's breathing. So this is the first miracle. This is what you have been crying out for. This is what you've been praying about in that moment. And then the next thing is he's being whisked off to the hospital. I know that you weren't even allowed in the ambulance because they needed to work on him at the time. You're following in a police car behind. Could you take us through that first few hours and then I suppose those first few days?
Yeah. So they did, when the nurses were giving CPR and they said he had a heartbeat, I said, yes, he has a heartbeat. Everybody keep praying. And that was absolutely the first miracle. And then he took a breath and yes, he took a breath and everybody praying. So everybody was just praying because I was asking and what I was asking was happening. And when we got out to the ambulance, I tried to get in the ambulance with them and they said, no, you need to get out because we need room to work on him. And as soon as I stepped out, I told Landon I'd be right behind him. He opened his eyes for 1 second just to tell me he's alive and he's okay. And so I got in the cop car behind. And so at that point, I knew he had a heartbeat. He took a breath and I knew he opened his eyes. So I was just sitting in that cop car behind the ambulance, just praying. I tried to call my mom and I tried to call my husband and my husband did not answer the phone. And my mom did answer the phone and I told her to hurry up and get to the hospital because somebody threw Landon and she was not comprehending what I was saying. And so I hung up on her and just told her to go to the hospital because I needed to pray. I felt like I just needed to keep praying. And so I prayed the whole way to the hospital. And as soon as you get there, they pull you into a room where the ambulance just pulls into, the garage door closes and they go into a life-saving room. So it's not like a formal sterile operating room. It's just like this big kind of garage kind of. And all these doctors were standing there and they told me the day that I left the hospital that was a miracle, that all the doctors that I needed, which was like every part of Landon's body, happened to be there that morning. None of them needed to be called in. And so they were prepared, waiting for Landon. And so when we came, Landon comes out of the ambulance and all these doctors just start saving his life. He had his spleen was bleeding out and so it needed to be emergency removed. They were studying his bones. They were taking his blood pressure. They were just getting everything okay so that he could get an MRI done across the hall. And so I was allowed to be in that room because it was, really fast, complete chaos. And I couldn't see Landon. So I stood on a chair and I just prayed that God be in this room and that he used these doctors' hands to save my baby's life. And I was just shouting for God to be in there and to use these doctors and to heal my son and that Satan was going to take nothing from us. And as I was doing that, one nurse stopped and she said, okay, if you don't need to be talking, please don't be talking, because everybody was shouting different things. And she said, I need to know what his blood pressure is. And I stood on that chair and I yelled out that it's perfect. And I have no idea where that came from, but it just came out of me because I was claiming Landon's body perfect. I just refused to let anything be wrong. I just knew that was the enemy and I needed Landon to be okay. And I refused to let the enemy take any part of Landon. And so I claimed his body perfect then. They they did everything they needed to do, and they rushed him across to an MRI after he was stable and to see the extent of his brain injury. And when they did that, I fell to the floor in the hallway of the hospital, and my mom and my brother and my dad came running down the hallway, and we all kind of sat on the floor and were crying. And I yelled out, I forgive the man who did this to Landon, because I grew up in a church where I knew that if you held on to anger or bitterness or unforgiveness or any of those horrible emotions inside your body, that God could not use you or work through you. And I needed Landon to be okay. And all that mattered to me was that Landon lives and not dies. And so I forgave that man, which meant I don't care what, I don't care. I did not care what his name was or why this happened or how it happened. I wasn't angry at him. I just wanted God to take him. God was the ultimate punisher, the ultimate judger, and that was not my job. So I gave him to God, and I asked God to use me to heal Landen. I wanted to be able to pray freely without holding on to any of that. I wanted to release that man from my mind at that moment.
And I mean, as you're telling the story as well, and I'm sure people are sitting thinking about it, we still don't know why, or the motive, or the reasons behind what that man did.
No, we do know I guess he told the police later that he was very angry because he wanted to pick up women at the mall, and then the night before he was not able to do that, and so he was determined to kill a woman. And so that he went to the mall to kill the night before, and it didn't work. So he came back in the morning, and I'm sure he wanted to kill me. I don't know, but he got Landen instead, and that's what he did. That's the reason he did it.
It doesn't make sense, but as you said, it
doesn't matter to me.
It doesn't matter. Exactly. It was this. I mean, I'm sure everybody's listening to this story and saying, I can't believe that in that moment you're forgiving, but it shows the focus that you had as well. Before we take a break, I just want to grab one part of this. And as we said, we're really just touching off on this. This is why you've written the book. This is why you want people to explore what it means for Jesus in their life as well. But that word perfect, which you talked about, that you were praying and saying, well, actually, I'm trusting that God has that idea of that He is perfect there. And that was actually something that in the next few weeks and period of time, the doctors and the nurses really took on board from you, didn't they? That they would talk about the fact that, okay, he goes through this MRI, that there's emergency surgery, there's the stability that gets happened. But even as they referred to you about it, they would say, well, this and this and this and this. But other than that, he's perfect. That is a remarkable thing that you did, changing their perspective too.
Yes, absolutely. They were all on board. They all saw my passion, and I was there not to be mad or angry. I was there to pray and help my son to survive. And I just wanted it to be a calm, peaceful, happy environment that we are witnessing a miracle in front of our eyes. And so when the doctors would tell me something, I would listen, and then I would wait till they were done and say, but other than that, it's perfect. And it just, after one surgery after the other, when they would come in, I would say that, and every doctor would smile and go along with me. And from that first day, from all the surgeries he had afterwards, they would say that to me. They would say that, I remember the face bones. They were all smashed, his nose and his cheeks and his forehead, and they set plates and they had to re-sculpt his nose, but they could do it, and they could do it with resolvable plates. And so as soon as he healed, it would be perfect. And so that's just what we went. Like, as long as we can fix it, as long as we can, move on, it'll be perfect. And so that's just what we did. And that's what every doctor said after they gave me a report.
We're going to just pause this story for a moment. We're going to be back in a couple of minutes' time. And we want to sort of go back and pick it up from this moment of when, he's in at the MRI, and then sort of follow some of the journey through, as Kari said, a whole lot of these surgeries, and the faith and the trust that she and her family had to place in Jesus, that Landen had to have such courage and strength in his body as well. We're going to talk more about that, and then the remarkable perspective that the family have now, and the incredible health that Landen also has now. We're going to talk about that next here on Towards Understanding.
Share your brand, your event, your message across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand by sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week, and with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.
Can we maybe just go back to that moment when you got to the hospital and he's being rushed off, they've stabilised Landen, and then checking out all the MRIs. When was the moment that you actually went, okay, there is a real sense that we're going to now start the long process of recovery? Was that something that occurred sort of almost instantaneously for you as he was even rushed off to this first surgery, or was that something that occurred after a couple of days or a few surgeries for you in your mind, Kari?
No, it was the first day. So after they saved his life in that room and then did the MRI, then they whisked him upstairs to actually do real surgery on every part of his body. And so I think that was about 9 surgeries for different things that were broken or needed attention. And so when they did that, then each doctor, they brought us up to a waiting room in this hospital. And that's when a lot of families started showing up. And so we were all kind of just sitting in a waiting room that entire day, waiting for a doctor to come in and say what they did. So a doctor would come in and say, okay, I'm the doctor who works on all the bones. And so his femur was broken. His elbows and arms were shattered. And so he would tell us what he did to stabilize those and how long it would take to heal. And then he would say it was perfect. And then we move on to the next doctor. Then the next doctor would come in and say, hey, I'm the doctor who, works on the brain. And right now, so we found out right away that the first MRI that he had looked okay. Now that he couldn't promise us anything because he said right now it looks okay. But as time goes on, it can swell and things can change. So we had to do another one at midnight. And so, or like 12 hours later, it was about midnight when we had the second one. So I knew that the first one was okay. So we were just going to stick with that. That was perfect. We went on to the next thing. And, all these doctors came in and told us what his injury was. But every doctor who came in and named an injury also repaired it. And we just knew it would take time to heal. And so I was content. When Landen, so finally at about, we got there about 10 in the morning, and at probably 9 or 10 at night, he was done, and he was going to be sent to a room where I would be able to go in and sleep with him. And that was the most peaceful I have ever felt in my life, because that was a day that he could have died, and he was okay. All the reports that I had were good. He was stable. The machines were beeping. He was all wrapped up, so peaceful. And my mom made me a little couch on the bed. I wasn't able to sleep in his bed that night because there was way too many machines and broken parts on him. But I slept on the couch, and I went to sleep that night thinking of these beeping machines and listening to him breathe. And it was just, God was in that room. It was so peaceful. And I was so thankful he was there and alive, and I knew we could get through this.
It reminds me, for those who perhaps are less familiar with a Christian faith, there's a passage in the Bible in Philippians chapter 4, which talks about, and in a sense it's not quite a formula, I don't think there are formulas in faith, but it's sort of the closest you might get, which talks about if we pray, if we constantly pray, if we do that with thanksgiving, this idea of trusting in God, if we do that with saying, well, I'm not going to be anxious about this, I'm going to trust in Him, then God will give us a peace that passes understanding. And I think most people, as they hear the story, right, this moment where your son has just gone through all of this, that actually when he's finally in your room and he's sitting there, and actually would almost be the opposite of peace, because, well, I've got to stay alert and awake in case something goes wrong, and I'm there and I alert the doctors or the nurses or whatever. But it seems like all the things you've already described, you went through that, this constant praying, this calling for it, this act of trust in Him, this idea of being positive and these ideas of rejoicing and not being anxious. It seems like you really lived out that part of the Bible. It was happening for you in that room.
I really did. And I think that God did that for me. He gave me this perfect peace. I was not anxious. I was not worried. I was so thankful going to sleep that He was alive and that this evil did not take over our family, and that Landen is here and we will get through this. And I felt Him. I just felt Him with me. There was not a worry in my mind. I just knew He did not save him to have something happen. So we are going to just keep standing here. And that's what we did. We did have to go downstairs at midnight for that second MRI. And that second MRI was just as perfect as the first one. And so that reassured me, and we went to sleep that night so peacefully. And I woke up so early in the morning and just looked out the window with my Bible and just thank God that my baby is here and he is alive. Yeah. It was amazing. It's a feeling I will never forget.
Throughout this whole process, you started writing as well. You're sort of journaling bits and pieces here and there. You're writing stuff. You've in the book captured these beautiful moments of your own writings, other people's prayers that were happening. Obviously, so many people were praying for him through this as well. We're not going to be able to touch off on every one of these moments, each of the things in there. So I'm sort of just acknowledging we're going to be skipping a little bit here as part of this story. But could you talk to us also even around the moments when you thought things were of the negative, and you have such a clear trust in God, but you're very open and honest in your account as well, that there is times when you started getting pretty annoyed. Things like, hey, Landen should be progressing more, this period of time, and he's having to stay in bed, and why aren't we sorting out how to fix this? But then you realize that was another miracle as well. Could you talk a bit about that story and perhaps others around that idea?
Yes, absolutely. So we were in the hospital for 4 months. Right away, everything looked good. He was healing so quickly that like a week down the road, they were thinking about moving us out to the rehab hospital where you just go to heal your bones. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. And then all of a sudden, he started to have this fluid in his lungs and he couldn't breathe good. So they had to put this tube in his side to drain this fluid, and they had to take it for testing. So we were going to be there for another week to figure out what that was. And so we had to stay in the hospital until they could get this leak to stop. And we couldn't, we didn't know what the leak was for a week. Once the test results came back, they said, well, it's good news and bad news. The good news is it's Kyle, because Kyle is like your lymph node, your lymph fluid that goes all the way through your body that was leaking, and it's not life-threatening. And so we thought, okay, we'll deal with that, however long that takes. They thought a couple weeks. But the bad news is we have to go on a fat-free diet to get it to stop. That's the way that you do it. Well, he couldn't eat anyways because his jaw was broken, and so it wasn't that big of a deal. We thought, well, we can make it. We'll get through. We'll just go on a fat-free diet for a few weeks, and the leak will stop. And a few weeks go by, and it's not stopping. And so they just keep having these meetings outside our room every morning trying to figure out what can we do to get this leak to stop. And not only wasn't it not stopping, it was more and more. So much fluid was coming out, they couldn't figure out what to do. And so they went to IV nutrition. So now he's awake. I should say really quick that he was in a medically induced coma for 11 days. And so for those 11 days, he was not aware of anything going on. After those 11 days, he was awake. And so he was slowly coming back to himself and, knowing what was happening to his body. And so it was painful. He had IV nutrition. He could not eat anything. He had these tubes coming out of his body, which was draining this yellow fluid, and the fluid would just not stop. And these drains were very painful. And so I was getting frustrated because there was no answer. They could not figure out how to get this leak to stop. And every day would be the same thing. We'd wake up, they don't know, let's try this. We tried a really hard surgery where they went in and just like roughed up his body. And they thought that if they roughed it up by his ribs, then maybe the body would respond to that roughing up and go to there and seal the leak. And not only did that not work, it made things way worse. He was intubated again. He was intubated 4 times in the hospital with different surgeries trying to get this leak to stop. And so I was getting frustrated, and I was just asking God, why can't we figure this out? There has to be an answer. And so I would just sit every day and, the whole day I'd be entertaining Landen because he was awake, and we would have fun. The hospital was fun. I was not letting him sit in there and feel sorry for himself or be sad. We would take the wheelchair down to the toy store. We would watch movies. We would have visitors. So he was, all day long, I was entertaining him. And then as soon as he would go to sleep, I would just sit with my Bible and just ask God for answers. We need answers. And it was just not coming. And what had happened was, we're getting to the end now of these 4 months. He's getting sicker and sicker. And there was a doctor. I had these same, doctors go on rotations. They're there for like 6 weeks, and then they leave, and then the new doctor comes. And so I was having these same doctors, and towards the end, a new doctor came in. He was looking at Landen very, concerned. He'd come into my room and look very concerned. And I did not like that because I was getting to my wit's end. I could not take it anymore. We can't figure out this leak. Now I have this new doctor. This new doctor looks like something is very wrong. And I did not like doctors to, show me or say something was really wrong. I just did not want to accept it. But I was getting broken. I was really broken till I got to that end of the 4th month there. And this doctor came in and he said, we're going to have to take away, he could not have food, but now we're going to have to take away drinks because we think that he might have a twisted intestine. And I said, you cannot take away drinks. The only thing we have for fun is to sip a new drink, a new soda, a new different kind of Powerade. Like, we need to have our drinks. Please don't take away our drinks. And I was just begging God, please help us find a solution to this. Something is wrong. We need help now. And what he did, it was took Landen downstairs to do an MRI or a CAT scan to see if his intestine was twisted. And when they did that, they found out that his vena cava had ripped off his heart when he was thrown, and it was hanging on by a thread. And so as he was sitting in the hospital, it was reattaching to his heart. And as it was doing that, it was getting tighter and tighter and tighter to the size of a pinhole. So 4 months later, this is what the leak was coming from. When your body is under so much stress, that chyle leak is what your body does, responds to tell you something's wrong, something's wrong. So his body was making all these new veins to get him blood to his heart because that vein was closing. It's the main vein going to your heart. You have to get blood flow. And so the body is so amazing that way. He was making all these new veins, and the doctor could see these pronounced veins all over his chest. And because it was the size of a pinhole, they needed to hurry up and put a stent in there before it all the way closed, and he would have died. And so it was the size of a pinhole when that doctor figured that out. We put a stent in that night, an adult-sized 10-millimeter stent, and the blood came rushing back. And that was it. That was the answer. The leak stopped, and we were able to leave the hospital a week after that to go to rehab for his bones. And it was amazing.
It's incredible, isn't it, that I know as you, this is one where you consider this another miracle, right? That if you'd sort of just gone on your time scale or everyone else's time scale, then it would have had him out of hospital. But this is exactly where he needed to be. So this was discovered. These moments occurred. And sometimes the hard yards of a difficult situation is actually the thing that God's trying to do to alert us to the thing that needs to happen.
Yes, absolutely. If he would have been discharged a week into the hospital, this would have been a problem, and we wouldn't have been in the hospital. So we needed to stay there. And the other miracle was that when he fell, he only broke one leg, one femur. So we had a femur broken. And so we were stuck in bed because of that. We could not get out of bed, plus of all the tubes that he had to stop this leak. So we were not allowed to get out of bed the whole 4 months. And the last, starting in the middle, after the 8 weeks mark of his femur broken, we were allowed to just stand up next to his bed, bear a little weight. And while he did that, he broke it a second time. And I was just devastated. They pulled up the x-rays and they're like, oh, his femur broke a second time. We're going to have to put another cast on, and it's going to be another 8 weeks in bed. And that was another time that I was just broken, asking God, why can't we get out of bed? Like, we can't get out of bed. We can't. I'm going to cry about it again because it was just so sad. We can't get out of bed. But if his femur didn't break a second time, he would have been off walking around, and the vena cava wouldn't have been able to reattach, and he would have died. And so we had to break the leg a second time also. And you just don't know sometimes why things are happening, but you just have to trust that they're happening for a reason, something you don't know that you need to know. We did not have all the information, and we just needed to trust that this was the right thing. And that's what it was.
It's a remarkable, we call it a testimony, right, to of what you've shared, this idea of, we talk this show that it's called Towards Understanding, and I think everybody who's listening, I'm certainly, as I hear your story, and I hear even now from, 6 or 7 years on, that you're still feeling that emotion, that there is sometimes those things that happen. And if we have that faith in Jesus, that's the moment we have to dig in it deeper, because we may not understand, but there is better purpose as we do trust, even in some of those really, really difficult times.
Yes, I mean, I knew that he was not doing this to punish us, so I knew there was a reason. I just didn't know. I didn't know yet, and I knew someday I would know too. I also had clarity that I just have to keep going. And I also, another lesson I learned in the hospital from these two major things were when you could not hang on any longer, because I could always hang on until those last two things, right before those two big incidents. I let go. As soon as you can't hang on any longer and you let go, you have to just hang on a little bit tighter, and the answer's coming. But it takes you to that break. You have to be broken so that you can see clearly what God is trying to do. And I was broken at least 2 or 3 times. There's another one with a stomach surgery that happened that was awful. But I was broken those 3 times, and then I could clearly see why I had to go through those things in order to keep Landen.
We're sort of getting towards the end of our opportunity of our conversation. So there's a whole lot in this, and as you mentioned, 4-month period, multi period of time where you're staying in the hospital. I think it might have been day 80 or something. It was the first time you even went home. So there's a cost on you as well, obviously on Landen, but this is where you needed to be. I want to just flick to Landen for a second, and if you could talk a little bit about his posture. I'm wondering, as he came to and then he started doing that, there's a remarkable sense of your positivity and faith and hope. What was his demeanor like as he was approaching this? My sense is with a mum like you, he's pretty positive as he even faces the tough stuff. But could you just talk to us a little bit about that? And then I want to spend the last bit of our time talking about how he is now and all the awesome things that are happening now. But could you just talk to us about that during this process as he was understanding and living in that hospital for so long and then in the rehab? What was his spiritual and physical and mental posture like?
Yes, when he first woke up from the medically induced coma, it was hard because he had a tube down his throat for so long, and so his throat hurt and he couldn't talk. And so he didn't talk for quite a while, and the doctors told me just to use a thumbs up or a thumbs down for how he's feeling. But he was not aware enough for those first few weeks after being awake to know why he was there. So he did not know why he was there. And we would just play games. He would just wake up and we would just play games every day and visit, his brother and sister and his dad would come. My mom and dad, his grandparents came every day, and we would just play games with him and tell him he's healing. We're just healing your body. And he was happy to be there. As soon as he was doing better, and he did ask me why he was there. And that is when I told him that he was at the Mall of America and he fell over the balcony. And so I told him he broke all his bones, and we have to stay in here until every bone is perfect and back together, and then we can go home. So at 5 years old, he did not need to know evil existed. He did not need to know that something horrible like that happened to him. So he just thought he fell and every bone broke, and we will go home as soon as every bone is better. And so that's what he thought, and that is what we were working on every single day, and we did it with joy. It was love, laughter, and joy. Today you ask him when he wants to go back. He loved the hospital, all the doctors and all the nurses and all the visitors and he loved it. Yeah. He doesn't know the hard part. The surgeries he was asleep for.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's just a credit to him and to you as a family too. Could you? We're gonna miss a whole lot of this story, and that's okay. Like we said, that's why you've written a book for people to read that story more and to understand. But could you talk to us a bit about today? How old is Landen now? How is he going now? How is the family operating in light of such a deep hurt and tragedy occurring in life, and then getting through that? Could you share a bit about him and your family now?
Yes. I mean, Landen is just so full of joy, so full of life, so happy to be alive. This happened on April 12th, 2019. And so we just came up on, just a couple of days ago was the 7-year anniversary of this. And so we celebrate every year. He calls it his miracle day. And this was the most joyous miracle day he ever had. He was so excited for his miracle day. This is the day that God showed the world a miracle and used Landen to show the world. And so I tell Landen all the time that you are the boy that God used to show the world the miracle and who he is. And so we celebrate that. We celebrate life. We don't take life for granted. This is joy. This is a joyous occasion. We can witness on who Jesus is, who our Heavenly Father is, and how much he loves us and how he can heal us. Landen there's nothing wrong. He is in traveling baseball. He plays hockey. He fishes. He just has so much fun. There's nothing wrong with him. People don't believe when he says, I'm the boy who was thrown at the Mall of America. He does not. Nobody believes him. He has to show pictures because you would not know. He has 0 injuries.
And how about you and, your husband, your family? How, there is such remarkable faith and trust and hope. Are there still, I would imagine that there's moments, even amidst all of the incredible trust in God and the miracles He's done, that there's perhaps times in the middle of the night you wake up and you're back in those situations. And how are you guys coping?
Yeah, I do. I mean, thinking of that, like when I just talked to you, thinking of all the things that he had to go through in the hospital, that makes me cry, because it was just so much pain. His body is covered in scars. So by looking at his body, you could see all the pain he went through, but he doesn't remember any of that pain. And we just move on, and we just want to tell as many people as we can. I will never tell somebody that I don't want to speak to them about this, because this is something that we can use to share who Jesus is with others. And I want everybody to know who He is and how much He loves us.
As we just finish our conversation, and you know, as we said, you've written this book, Miracle at the Mall, and we've only been able to just touch off on some of the things. There's so much more in various depths and various areas that we haven't been able to do. And just as somebody's listening to your story, and I suppose I'm especially thinking of somebody who perhaps in people in two categories. Someone who might be saying, well, I have a strong faith in Jesus, and you know, I haven't faced something that you've faced, Kari, but I want to make sure I have a great trust in Him in the future. What's a good way for me to think about things? And likewise, somebody who perhaps is listening and saying, well, I know this is sort of a Christian-based radio station I'm listening to, the podcast I'm listening to, but I want to make sure that maybe to start these first steps of, Kari seems pretty convinced about this Jesus and what He's doing. Maybe there's something more in my life. What would you say to those two groups of people, your encouragement from your perspective now?
Yeah, I feel like life is so short. You are here on earth for a blink of an eye. I mean, maybe 100 years if you're lucky. But heaven is eternity. And so if I die tomorrow, I'm not scared about dying. I'm happy to go be home with Jesus forever. And if I'm wrong about that, then I will be in the ground. But if you're wrong about that and you think that there's no heaven, then that's really sad that you will miss out on it because you didn't know. And so I just feel like it's a no-brainer. This is how Landen explains it to people, is if heaven is for real, you don't want to miss it. And you don't need to be scared to die, because that is where you will be for eternity. And it's beautiful and it's amazing and it's full of love. Why would you want to miss out on that?
I love that. Kari, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us. As we said at the start of our conversation, you know, the program's called Towards Understanding, and I think we've headed in towards a space of what it means to understand more, to move past some of the tragedies, to move past that and to hold on to what God has got for us, even in the midst of the tough stuff. So thank you for that encouragement. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for the spirit that you carry it in as well. We so appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
My guest, Kari Hoffmann, she is the author of the book Miracle at the Mall, here on Towards Understanding.